During the Senate confirmation hearing for Biden's Supreme Court nominee, Ketanji Brown Jackson, Senator Marsha Blackburn asked, "Can you define the word woman?" Ketanji Brown Jackson said, "I can't. I can't." This may be one of the most shocking stories I've seen in a long time, that this psychotic cult-like insanity has reached the Supreme Court. Now, I understand it's reached the White House, sort of. Joe Biden isn't an adherent of critical race theory cult ideology, but he does help it in many ways. We're now at the point where we have a Supreme Court justice nominee saying they cannot define the word woman. Here's what you do right now, my friends. I want you to share this with any of the naysayers, anyone you know, a friend who's skeptical. Now, you're probably not going to be able to convince the most die-hard leftists or cult members, and that's just a sad reality. But a lot of people tell me, Tim, I have parents, and they won't watch your show, and they won't watch Fox News, and they won't read conservative outlets. They won't read anything. They only watch CNN. You know, the first thing I want to say is, you should watch CNN and MSNBC, and you should watch Fox News and read conservative outlets. You should definitely watch this show. No, but my thing is, you should be trying to watch as much as possible, getting your information from as many sources as possible. If you know someone who has been reasonable with you but doesn't believe you because they say it's all fake news, this is Politico.com. This is not a right-wing source showing you that a Supreme Court justice nominee says, "I can't define the word woman." Blackburn said, "You can't? Not in this context. I'm not a biologist." Interesting. Last night we talked about this in the member segment on Timcast IRL, and Emily Jashinsky said, "How bigoted to assume the word woman has anything to do with biology." Tongue in cheek. But is this not a wake-up call to anybody who's not been paying attention? Anybody who doesn't see the news? Woman, easily defined. You ready for this? Adult human female. I'm not making that up. That's what Google says. That's what Wikipedia says. It's what Merriam-Webster says. Now, many of these dictionaries, Merriam-Webster, I think, Google doesn't do this. They try to put in, a woman could also mean a trans woman. But that statement alone means nothing. In fact, when you pull up Wikipedia and look up woman, female, and trans woman, Wikipedia can't give you a coherent definition or train of thought in this matter. It doesn't sync. The definitions do not logically connect to each other, and thus the whole thing becomes incoherent. Now, this is not having anything to do with trans people at all. I'm specifically referring to the fact that we can't even define what a woman is. I mean that as a culture. Now, of course, you and I, we can define the word woman rather easily. Yet, you repeatedly ask people on the left what woman means, and they cannot give you a definition. This is the craziest thing to me, because you would think if their goal was to assist trans women and help push for rights, they would have at least sat down for 10 seconds to come up with messaging and a cohesive structure to explain this to people. But if you can't even explain to people what you're fighting for, how does any of this make sense? Now, look, you guys know I'm all about civil libertarianism. Somebody is trans or whatever, more power to them. I think people have a right to live the way they choose to live, so long as they're not harming others. And which brings us to a bigger question here. Blackburn was asking about little girls who want to grow up to compete, and they're watching these women get beat in the NCAA championships to a biological male, and there's a lot of issues there. Ketanji Brown Jackson, by not being able to define the word woman, it's profound, because she is a judge who will need to, in plain language, as per the 1964 Civil Rights Act or any other Supreme Court opinion that uses the word woman to grant women civil liberties. But I want to point something else out as well. Up top here on the screen, you can see I have the Ground News extension in my browser. I think it's fantastic. I've been using it for a long time, and I don't normally do sponsored spots on this channel, but we have a couple coming up. But I want to give a shout out to ground.news. Go to ground.news/Tim Pool and, sign up, get the browser extension. It's an excellent service. What you see on top of Politico.com, it shows you the bias split across 10 sources. 20% of the outlets that are reporting this lean left and 80% lean right. This is exactly what I'm trying to explain. This story right here from Ground News, they show it. Blackburn to Jackson, can you define the word woman? Actually, you know what I want to do? I want to play this for you. Actually, I'll play this in a second, and because Ground News actually has the video from C-SPAN. But take a look at this. The Daily Wire, of course, right wing. Politico, left. Isn't that funny? Left leaning. The Post Millennial, lean right. Daily Caller, right. Fox News, right. Washington Times, right. And there's more. Examiner, right wing. Real Clear Politics, leaning right. Mediaite, leaning left. The Paradise, far right. This is why I think Ground News is fantastic. Again, ground.news/Tim Pool. Not only do they break down the ideological bias of the outlets, and I think that's fantastic. I think they do a pretty good job. I'm not a big fan of mixed factuality. That gets harder to define, but I do appreciate what they do. But they also show wealthy private owner. The Daily Wire, wealthy private owner Ben Shapiro. Politico, wealthy private owner Capital News. Then you have the Daily Caller, other Tucker Carlson and Neil Patel. It breaks down who owns these outlets. This is exactly what you should show the people who don't believe you when you say these things are happening. Because they're breaking down the bias. And they're going to say, the reason you don't hear about this stuff is because the only outlets to report this are Mediaite and Politico. The only left-wing outlets to report this are Politico and Mediaite. So I'm not surprised you don't hear this and conservatives do. So shout out Ground.News sponsoring this segment today. And regardless of the sponsorship, I think it's easy for me because I'm a fan of their service. You'll also notice that I typically use the Ground.News extension. So when you're watching my segments, you can actually see the bias breakdown. I should reference it more often to explain why I have it here. When you are watching these stories, you can see this is something the right is talking about and the left is not. That right there is absolutely fantastic in aiding your arguments and your discussions and your debates. So again, check out ground.news/Tim Pool. Once again, shout out and thank you to Ground.News for sponsoring this segment. I'm a fan. I really, really am. I like the idea of showing the bias and showing the owners. Look at this. Independent. You've got Mediaite. It says it's owned by Floyd Abrams. That's just great. Just absolutely great. Check them out. But let's get back to the article in question. Actually, let's use Ground News to play the segment in question.
Can you provide a definition for the word woman?
Can I provide a definition?
Mm-hmm.
No.
Yeah.
I can't.
You can't?
Not in
Okay.
this context.
So
I'm not a
The
biologist.
meaning of the word woman is so unclear and controversial that you can't give me a definition?
Senator, in my work as a judge, what I do is I address disputes. If there's a dispute about a definition, people make arguments, and I look at the
All right.
law and I decide. So I'm not.
The fact
I would just pause there and say, there is actually a dispute over the definition of the word woman. Sure, but one side has a clear-cut, cohesive definition that aligns with the encyclopedia, with like every encyclopedia and basically every culture on the planet. No joke. The word woman, let's say you went to, any other country. They have a word for woman, and they will tell you adult human female. In the United States, sure, there's a dispute, but it's because we have this weird wokeness infecting our highest levels of governance. It was just TV and video games at some point, right? Then movies. And I warned everybody, it will reach the highest levels. And here we are. Ketanji Brown Jackson says, she handles disputes. And if there's a dispute over the definition of the word woman, there's not in the encyclopedia. Now, who is coming to you personally with that argument? Therein lies the issue. There exists laws on the books already. And we use in plain language the word woman. I've said it before. By changing the definition, they change the laws retroactively. If most people believe woman means adult human female, then the law is not in question. Changing the law is difficult. If law exists or precedent exists, it's difficult. But what happens then when they come back and say the word woman means something different? In 10 years or so, they'll say, well, everybody knows woman doesn't mean adult human female. Therefore, we should challenge this Supreme Court precedent about, these particular issues. Moving forward, as the left seeks to change language, this is going to be this will have a profound impact. And I think a really good example is well-regulated. Regulated today basically means government regulation, government standardizing or passing restrictions and laws. But back during the era of the Bill of Rights, the 1770s, into the 1780s, regulated didn't mean that. A well-regulated militia simply meant a well-functioning. Regulated meant like you had the equipment that was up to date and working. A functional, militia is necessary for a free state. That's what they were saying. Back then, they didn't have police departments. The militia were their law enforcement. And this was to protect the United States from enemies, both foreign and domestic. Now that the definition of the word regulated has mostly changed, you have to explain to people what the word actually meant. We can't change our laws based on emerging definitions. And therein lies the big challenge, and therein lies the tactic that we're seeing right now. So let me show you what's going on. Ketanji Brown Jackson, I would like to give you the definition of the word woman from Google. Plainly put, it says an adult female human being. That's it. That's what it says. It goes on to have additional definitions. A female member of a workforce. Thousands of women were laid off. That's weird and that makes no sense. A female member of a workforce. I guess, if they say, men were working or women were working, I suppose you could say that it's irrelevant. A female person associated with a particular place, activity, or occupation. A Princeton woman. But notice how they're saying female. Female adults in general. A disrespectful form to address a woman. Don't be daft, woman. That's weird. But still, notice they're all saying, all these definitions, female. Dated, a female person who is paid to clean someone's house, a daily woman. A person's wife, girlfriend, or female lover. He wondered whether Billy had his woman with him. A person with the qualities traditionally associated with females. I feel more of a woman by empowering myself to do what's right for me. Now, that's the closest one that could get to trans, but I actually agree with that definition. Saying like womanhood or womanly or let out your inner woman, you could use it in a certain context, referring to social roles around females. However, woman is still not defined as anything but a female human. A female individual, one. It's fascinating. Okay, let's go to Wikipedia. Wikipedia says a woman is an adult female human. Prior to adulthood, a female human is referred to a girl. The plural women is sometimes used. Yada yada yada. We get it. We then have so if you're on Wikipedia and you're trying to understand this, you see a woman is adult female human. Okay, what does female mean? It says female is the sex of an organism that produces the large non-motile ova egg cells, the type of gamete, sex cell, that fuses with the male gamete during sexual reproduction. A female has larger gametes than a male, etc., etc. Then we'll take a look at woman. Again, it says trans women develop a gender identity that does not align with their male sex assignment at birth, while intersex women may have characteristics that do not fit the notions of female biology. So let's take a look at the trans woman section. A trans woman is a woman who was assigned male at birth. And herein lies the clash of definitions, and the reason why a Supreme Court justice can't define for you what's happening. A trans woman is a woman. Okay, let's click woman. A woman is an adult female human. Okay, let's click female. A female is the sex of an organism producing large non-mobile ova. And it says, in the species that have males and females, sex determination is based on either chromosomes or environmental conditions. Most female mammals, including female humans, have 2 X chromosomes. Here's the point. Based on what Wikipedia says, a trans woman is actually a trans man. Okay, so again, no disrespect towards any individual or group. I'm pointing out the encyclopedia's problem. And if they want, someone should fix it. To put it simply, if a woman is female and a female produces non-mobile ova and a trans woman is a woman, what the trans woman Wikipedia article is saying is, to break it down, a trans woman is an adult female human who typically has 2 X chromosomes but was assigned male at birth. That is to say, the baby that was born was female, but the doctor said it was male. Okay, that's a trans man. Or maybe I'm wrong. The problem here is we're trying to define these terms specifically so we can ensure rights and ensure the laws are being followed properly. But if you were to take someone with no exposure to any of this media or internet and have them read these articles, they would assume a trans woman is a female human being with ovaries who was incorrectly called a male when born. That I don't even think that's a trans man either. That's just doesn't play into modern culture. Actually, a doctor calling, so you have a little girl growing up developing female characteristics but being called a boy. Far be it for me to understand how any of this stuff is actually making sense as it plays out in the courts or whatever. This is why we need definitions. To put it simply, how can you ensure people have rights if you can't define what a person is and why the rights are guaranteed to them? It's a challenge, I suppose, but you'd probably want a Supreme Court justice who could tell you what these things mean. I mean, I'll put it simply. A woman is an adult female human. That's what Wikipedia says. Well, here's what we're getting now. AmericaMagazine.org says the racism behind the attacks on Ketanji Brown Jackson. This week on the Gloria Purvis podcast, Gloria speaks with Angela Onwuacha Willig, Dean and Professor of Law at Boston University, leading scholar, blah, blah, blah. And, you get the point. With Gloria, she discusses the nomination of Ketanji Brown Jackson to the Supreme Court and the racism underpinning the negative reaction to Biden's announcement that the nominee would be a black woman. It's remarkable. I don't care about Ketanji's race or name or skin color or upbringing. I care about whether or not she will be a good, reasonable Supreme Court justice. Now, there are several issues. One of the issues brought up was her leniency towards people who have committed crimes against children in unspeakable ways. And the left and the media are defending this. It's actually quite scary. Very scary. Her race has nothing to do with it. The fact that she can't define the word woman plays more to competence on the bench and has zero to do with race. It's the weirdest thing, isn't it? Can you tell me what a woman is? I can't. Okay, you're incompetent. I'm sorry, you are literally incompetent. How can you interpret Roe v. Wade? How could you possibly hope to interpret Roe v. Wade? Look at this. SCOTUS nominee Ketanji Brown Jackson says Roe v. Wade is settled law. How would you know that? You don't know what a woman is. This is what she said. You know what I should have done? I should have pulled up the language of Roe v. Wade. It says, Roe and Casey are the settled law of the Supreme Court concerning the right to terminate a woman's pregnancy. Jackson said, whoa! She can't even define what woman means. And she thinks she can assert anything about Roe v. Wade? A woman's pregnancy? Well, hold on there a minute. You mean a bleeder's pregnancy? Because trans women don't get pregnant. So what does that mean, Jackson? You see, this is the problem of not being able to define words. She's using a word she can't define. I would have appreciated it if Marsha Blackburn or anyone could have responded and said, I couldn't help but use the word woman in that sentence. What did you mean by that? Man, you got to see the Matt Walsh thing on Dr. Phil. Define woman. This is what I do. I get these emails, I get these phone calls from these Democrats who want me to donate. And because I donated large amounts to like Tulsi Gabbard and Andrew Yang, who else did I donate to? I donated to a progressive out of San Francisco running against Nancy Pelosi. Because of that, the Democrats look at me as like a whale. So they hit me up incessantly saying, we want a max contribution from you. And it's laughable because the donations I made to these individuals were for specific reasons several years ago. And boy, have y'all lost me since 2018. But they hit me up and I just respond with, get this. They text me. I text back, how many genders are there? Like genuine question, like, please tell me what you want to do. Look, I want all the trans people in the world to have rights, 100%. I want them to be able to live their lives free of harm or fear and all of that stuff. And in order to have that, you have to define the words so we know exactly how to handle certain circumstances. Well, guess what? I get these texts. I say, how many genders are there? Can you define woman? They stop responding. They stop texting. One of the easiest ways to get people to stop hitting me up for donations, I guess, is just to ask them to define their positions, and they can't do it. They can't. I've had one person hit me up being like, we got to ban guns. And I was like, excuse me? Send me a text like, we're going to work on gun control legislation. And I responded with, but I want a machine gun. And then they also don't respond. I guess, look, when you've got volunteers sending out these messages, they don't want to waste time on people they know won't donate to them. But maybe they'll ask themselves why it is that I donated to several Democrats back in 2018 and 19, and why I ain't going anywhere near these people today. You want to know what it is? In the primaries, with the one person primarying Pelosi, I think Pelosi's got to go. I think she is crooked. She is as crooked as they come. At the very least, a young progressive I can argue with, and we can disagree on things. Sure, I don't know if it will be. I mean, I suppose you can argue it could be worse, but in my opinion, we had this candidate who was anti-war, pro-pot legalization, and I'm like, I will take those things over Nancy Pelosi because war is a huge issue. I'm not a fan of any of that stuff. That's one of the reasons I voted for Trump in 2020. Get our troops out of there. And that's better. But as for the candidates, I'm like, Tulsi Gabbard, man, everybody knows she's better than anything the Democrats had to offer at the time. And Andrew Yang actually had a huge list of policy positions. Now, I think Yang has sort of faltered in many ways. But 2018 was a huge wake-up call for making any kind of donation to any member of Congress, honestly, to be completely honest. All of these people who promised to fight for kitchen table issues, and the moment they got elected, they said, sure, Pelosi, tell me what to do, and they voted for impeachment. Evil, scumbags, spineless, losers. Jeff Van Drew, not so much. He actually said, I ain't playing that game. I'm a Republican now. And I was like, wow. Granted, Mitch McConnell and Kevin McCarthy are also bad, and Lindsey Graham is terrible, and I overwhelmingly just despise the Republican Party. There's a handful of Republicans that do a good job, though. Freedom Caucus tends to be a bunch of good people who are actually doing good work. So I'll end with this. Let's tie a ribbon around all of this. Ketanji Brown Jackson, can you please define the word woman? No, I can't. Can you tell me about Roe v. Wade? Roe v. Wade guarantees the right of to terminate a woman's pregnancy. You just used a word you can't even define. Welcome to the modern era. So here's what you can do. You can show this one to your friends, the ones who don't believe you, and just look, say, if you hate Tim Pool, good. Tell me every reason you hate him. Now, here's a question I have. Can you answer it? Probably not. I'll leave it there. Next segment's coming up at 1 p.m. on this channel. Thanks for hanging out, and I'll see you all then.